Okay, so we're going to move on now into another area with we've got some great examples for you to have a listen to coming up in a moment as we discuss bridging divides through sports, and that is featuring youth organizations, DC youth organizations. And I would like straight away, as per the formula, to ask our moderator and our panelists to please come up on stage. Thank you. Good to see you. Come on up. Yeah, good to see you. Thank you. Right, as you all take your seats, I'm going to introduce you. And just give us a wave when your name is called, please, so we all know who's sitting where. Mohammed Al-Menfi is the co-founder of Rugby 2018. He's a Master of Science in the Foreign Service, but this is an extraordinary story. Rugby 2018, coming out of Benghazi in Libya. You're going to have to talk us through some of this, I think, Mohammed. But it is a story inspired by a movie, in fact, but a very powerful message within a movie called Invictus, which was about the success of the South African rugby team in 1995 when they won the World Cup. Nelson Mandela's great moment as he put on a jersey, a rugby jersey, which was a white man's jersey, a white man's sport, and it was a great symbol of hope for a country. Mohammed, thanks very much for joining us. Bethany Henderson. Bethany got a little trail earlier on because she is CEO of DC Scores, a highly regarded social entrepreneur in her own right, and DC Scores was described as the best run non-profit in this area. Thank you very much for being with us. Miles Jackson is the founder of Cuba Skate. Now, Cuba Skate is based in DC, it's based in LA, and it is based in, as it should be, Havana. Miles visited Cuba back in 2010. I think he fell in love with the place, effectively, and has been growing skateboarding in Cuba since then, and at the same time developing leadership skills and opportunities for young people within Cuba. And Brendan Toohey is the co-founder of and executive director of Peace Players. Brendan, correct me if I get this wrong, but you and your brother were both playing professional basketball on either side of the border in the island of Ireland, so Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, and has now grown Peace Players, which I'm sure you can explain in due course, beyond Ireland, into Israel, the West Bank, and Cyprus as well. And our moderator is Catherine Marshall, whom I'm sure many of you know extremely well. Catherine is a senior fellow at the Georgetown University Berkeley Center for Religion, Peace, and World Affairs, and it is in your hands. Thank you, Catherine.
Well, good afternoon, and that was a particularly difficult act to follow, but we will do our best to keep you awake and inspired, I think is the basic idea. I'm with the Berkeley Center for Religion, Peace, and World Affairs at Georgetown, as well as the World Faiths Development Dialogue. And of course, the question might arise, what does that have to do with sport? And it is partly because the values that are reflected here are very much the values that drive us in our work for peace and for development. But there's another fact, which is that we are a sort of sibling of sport in the service of humanity, because we at Georgetown and at the Berkeley Center have worked also with Dr. Honda with the idea of supporting and working with and lifting up the exciting work that is being done in many different corners of the world to link these goals of peace, work for peace and development with sports. And I did want to start with some challenges in this spirit of action, because I think the first thing is that there are so many different stories by particularly young people who have created bold and creative, unusual, impossible ventures that have often linked their social values with sports. but their stories are very little known. So telling the stories is a first piece. I think a second one, and we've tried to do this in the course of the series of meetings that we've had, and by the way, there are some reports on the earlier meetings on sports and values in the back of the room. In the course of that, we've tried to see if there's any mapping of all of these kinds of activities, and the answer is no. It's not known, very, very poorly known that how many there are, even in the Washington area. It would take quite an effort to find the creative efforts. And third, there's been very little effort to evaluate them, to see what works and what doesn't, which I think is actually the core of what we're going to talk about this afternoon. And then finally, there are no real mechanisms to support them. So the effort that the ISPS and Sport in the Service of Humanity is making to identify remarkable leaders and to provide them with support is unusual and is special. So with that, those are sort of the immediate challenges that I see. But I'd like to start and ask, Mohammed, how did you get started? What is the story?
First, thank you so much for inviting me here. As you all know, Libya in 2011 was part of the Arab Spring, and we had this high hopes that we're moving toward a change and changing the regime and having a new country. But it didn't take us 3 more years in 2014 where we fell into this second cycle of civil war. And we were trapped in the civil war. And being in Benghazi, I'm from Benghazi, witnessing the first and witnessing the second, I've witnessed that we were finding very difficult to cope with the situation with the wars. 50% of our city was, 50% of the area was in a war zone that led to a lot of schools and universities to shut down and not operate. And that made us to ask the question, what can we do in such conditions? And we noticed that kids are playing, kids and youth in general, playing on the street, and they are prone either to be radicalized or to join the militias that is fighting. Because, you know, this youth adventurism, they need to be channeled somewhere. But all the channels that were available at the time was violent channels. And we thought maybe we could use sport after watching the Invictus movie. Maybe we could use the sport in making this adventurism, this energy, into something positive. And this is how we came up with Rugby 2018. We started with a few kids, training them, and then posting their picture using technology and social media to kind of lifting them up and also recruit other kids to come and join our program. But that was kind of the main goal in 2014, is that we played for peace. We just want peace, and we don't want the kids to get themselves into trouble. But things have started to grow organically. In 2015, when the war kind of started to settle down, we were, all right, let's play for unity now. Let's bring the IDBs and make them play with the host community. Let's try to integrate them together. And at the end of 2015, and moving toward 2016, where the war ended in my city, we were like, all right, let's play for society now. Let's teach these kids and these youth that they have to pay back to the country. If the state has collapsed, then I think we need to spread an important message that we need to pay back to our country. If there is no country if there's no state or government to give you, we need to teach these kids that they need to give back. So that's why that was our slogan in 2016, is that we did that through cleaning campaigns and volunteering campaigns. We just wanted to kind of spread this culture of service and volunteering to our kids.
Bethany, how did you get started? What's the story?
Yeah, so DC Scores is 25 years old this year. We were actually started by a young school teacher, a Teach for America Corps member right down the street from here in Adams Morgan. And she noticed that a bunch of her 10-year-old 5th grade girls were hanging around the streets after school. Now, Adams Morgan today is very different than Adams Morgan was 25 years ago, and it was really not a safe place for kids to be hanging around the streets after school. She was a soccer player, and she said, hey, I like soccer. If you want to come hang out with me after school, I'll teach you how to play soccer. So some of them did. She did. She got a couple of her other TFA friends at other schools to do the same thing. And for a few months, they had a nice soccer thing going. And then the weather got bad, and the kids kept coming. And she realized they really needed that space. They really trusted her. That was their safe space. And so she thought to herself, well, they liked one thing I like, soccer. Maybe they'll like something else I like, poetry. And you saw that with Maya today. Poetry was her art form of choice. And so she started teaching these girls how to write original poetry, and really quickly found that the bonds of trust they built with each other, their teammates, and with her, their coach, on the soccer field, translated really, really well into the art form of poetry. And from there, DC Scorers was born. With 10 girls, now today we serve over 15,000 kids in 12 cities across the US and Canada, including 3,000 right here in Washington, DC.
Right. So Miles, your story is perhaps the least expected. So how did you get involved in skateboard in Cuba?
Yeah, well, first I'd like to thank everyone for being here and for the opportunity to speak. President DeJoy, especially, I was at your wedding when I think I was like 5 or 6 years old. Grew up in Columbia Heights. My father's a professor here, so I spent a lot of time, although I went to Michigan. My sister did track and field here at Georgetown, and from the days of Iverson and Victor Page, I'll always bleed Hoya blue. But yeah, so I went to Michigan, played soccer there, and then my last semester of my senior year, I studied abroad in Cuba. At that point in time, George Bush had a few programs, and then as Obama became president, there was more leniency and kind of doors opened for the opportunities for academic studies and cultural relationships on the island. And so I studied there, and I met my partner. She and I fell in love down there and became really good friends, and then met this community of local skateboarders that were wonderful kids. We learned a lot in the classroom and traveled to almost every province across the island. And a lot of our academic experiences, it was an anthropology program. We learned a lot in the classroom and in museums. But what we learned most was through the people. And I think that's kind of echoed today as you think about the high level impact in sports and things like that. But you have to be in touch with the athletes, and you have to be genuinely involved with people on a community level. And so I think that's what's been great. Now we're going into celebrating 10 years in 2020. I never would have thought we would be where we are today, but we've had the likes of the world's greatest skateboarders come to Cuba with us, participate in cultural exchanges, and beyond giving away skateboards and things like that, we're providing resources where we have a wood shop set up in Cuba, we've built DIY skate parks, and a lot of life lessons. Skateboarding is indeed a sport. It will make its debut in the Olympics next summer in Tokyo. But it's also a jazz and art form of poetry of many sorts. And I think, you don't juggle a soccer ball or dribble a basketball around a city, but you skate around a city. And it is a vehicle for, utilitarian purposes and a very, genuine opportunity to engage and interact and build communities.
Great. And Brendan, how did Peace Players come to be?
Yeah, I think for us, my brother Sean and I, it started really early on growing up. We lived in a neighborhood called Shepherd Park in DC, right off 16th Street, in a very diverse community. And like probably most of you all, grew up playing sports. And every day we were at the playground playing basketball and developed friendships with people that looked different from us. And ended up playing in high school and played in college, and I found myself in Ireland playing, I would call it professional basketball. That's using it a little bit loosely. It's probably like the lowest level of European professional basketball. But I did get paid a little bit, and I had a lot of time on my hands. And I was living in Dublin, and I started traveling to Belfast to do work there. And in Northern Ireland, as you probably all know, there's been a long-standing divide between the Protestant and Catholic communities. And young people there grow up in different neighborhoods. They go to different schools, and they even play separate sports. Sports are segregated. And basketball was a new enough sport. It didn't have any historical baggage. It was one of the few ways you could get Protestant and Catholic kids actually to come together and do something fun, and neither side felt like the other side owned it. And so my brother, I was only there for a year, came home, thought I was moving on with my life, and a couple years later, I helped my brother get to Northern Ireland, and he came back after spending a year there with this idea to start an organization, using sports to bridge divides. And we looked around, so this is in 2000. We looked around and didn't really see anybody doing it on there were some smaller efforts, but not on like a bigger stage. And we thought, this doesn't make any sense. Anybody that, we've talked about it all day, anybody that knows anything about sports knows what a great value it is to bring people together. And so we wrote letters to our family and friends. We raised about $7,000. We became a 501c3, and my brother moved to Durban, South Africa, through a few relationships that he had developed in Northern Ireland, and built it from there. And so Durban, South Africa, 2001, went back to Northern Ireland as our own organization in 2002, Israel and the West Bank in 2005, Cyprus 2007, and then we launched a big partnership with Nike in 2017 to bring our program and learnings to the United States. So we're now in 7 US cities. And I think what we're both most proud about is that if you go to these places where our organization exists, people talk and feel about it like we do. There's a great sense of local ownership. Each one of our sites is its own entity with its own boards and management and leadership. And I think that's, for us, although we made a lot of mistakes and it was tough, that transition to having this idea, to having other people really own it, that's for us what like scale and impact looks like.
Well, Mohammed, Libya, it's hard to think of a situation with more challenges. So how do you see the kind of thing you're doing? What lessons do you draw from that about ending the terrible conflict that's happening there now?
Yeah.
And maybe even go beyond now that you're studying these things at a high level.
Absolutely. I remember we were like holding trainings and we can hear the bullets on top of our heads. And we had also like sometimes airplanes, and security issue was one of the main challenges. I guess using sport in post-conflict or in conflict areas is very important and crucial, but it has to be part of a bigger plan to bring the country in stability. I think alone itself, as the individual level is important, but if we want to think about it in ways making a larger impact and bringing the country in stability, it has to be integrated in a bigger efforts to bring to have like a larger scale and also to have a social return. But yeah, I think it's really crucial and it's really important in developing individuals and people for the future.
So it's the leadership, but it's also the contribution to
Absolutely.
something much larger. How would you answer that question, Bethany, in terms of even looking at this city and its challenges?
So American inner cities, which is where America Scores and DC Scores work, have a lot of challenges, right? And if you think of your typical poverty statistic, your typical child with childhood trauma, that's the kids that we work with. Our programming is 100% free. We have no barriers to entry. So access is the first and foremost issue, is how do you create access to kids in a country where sports are pay to play at this point in our history. If you look at most youth sports, they are pay to play, and the kids that we work with are just boxed out. Even if they weren't boxed out, they couldn't get there because they're geographically boxed out, because the pay-to-play leagues happen in the suburbs, they happen in the wealthier communities. So access is number one. But as important as access, what we really think about is that team experience. The kids that we work with fight so many challenges on a daily basis. When I say kids, I mean kids. We focus on kindergarten through 8th graders, right? So little kids. They fight so many challenges, whether it's hunger, whether it's parents who are in jail, whether it's crime on their streets. We've had a number of kids go through our program and write their poetry about seeing their brother or their neighbor gunned down in front of them, right? Really, really tough things. Where do you turn? So for us, it's about the power of teams. That's the beauty of soccer as the sport that we use, because we build neighborhood teams. And that team, which we embed in that kid's school building or in that kid's rec center, so the kid doesn't have to go anywhere, the parents don't have to go anywhere, the parents know their kid's going to be safe for a couple extra hours after school, that team wraps around that child. Not only does that child play in our soccer leagues with that team, that same soccer team, every soccer team, writes and performs original poetry together and designs and carries out service projects together. So it's taking that team experience they have through soccer, showing them that they can actually find their voice. It is a safe team. It's a safe place to express their voice, to share their words. You heard some of that with Maya today. Our kids' poems get really raw really quickly because they trust their team, because they trust their coaches. And then we don't leave it there. We help them take action, right? So the service project component is all child-directed. It's all curricular based, it's tied to national standards, but what it really does is help that kid say, okay, I've now shared in my safe environment, what am I going to do about it? And we help them take that action and discover that agency, that efficacy that they, whether they are 8 or 14, can actually affect the world around them. The combination of those activities only is possible because the kids have that shared soccer team experience, because they come together with that same team every day, because they know they're going to be out in the field with those kids, they know they're going to be out in the community with those kids, and because those kids are the ones they see at school, and because their coaches are the ones they see at school. So the other way that we add on to that and ensure that environment stays safe for the kids, allows them to be brave, helps them trust, is that our coaching model is that we hire, train, and pay coaches from within their school buildings. So whether that be a school teacher, a custodian, or an assistant principal, I have all of them in my coaching corps. Those adults are adults, they're mentors the kids are going to bump into every day in the halls, they're going to bump into at the corner store, they're going to bump into on Sunday at church with grandma. They're adults they develop a relationship with outside of that more hierarchical classroom relationship, and they're adults that become their sticky mentors for the rest of their lives. Those adults are their soccer coaches. Those adults are their poetry coaches, but it comes back to that power of what a sports team as that nexus, as that nucleus can do.
So Miles, I guess you didn't really get into this thinking you were going to make peace between two hostile nations, but how do you see this contributing to the broader good, the broader inspiration that we're looking at?
Yeah, for sure. You know, when we started, the goal was just, we made some really good friends. Let's do what we can to come back. And when Lauren and I started it, she said, in America, we have an excess of everything and an access to everything. And so we thought about that and reached out to skate shops and things like that. And then as time went on, and the kind of American-Cuban political relationship got better under the Obama years and things like that, we raised the Cuban flag for the first time ever at the Hall of Nations here at the Kennedy Center a few years ago. And who would think that, you know, skateboarders would be doing that? And so a lot of our work is re-examining the relationship between our countries, and then also re-examining what a skateboarder is. A lot of people look at them and think, oh, it's a delinquent or a troubled kid or something like that. But skateboarders, a lot of the presentation and the panels today are about traditional sports. Skateboarding is a very novice and new sport to the general public. I think, you know, and anytime I tell anybody about Cuba skate, they say, oh, do you know Tony Hawk or this or that? It's still kind of defining its role, but we have to kind of be the diplomats and the vanguards to show that skateboarders are very disciplined. It's not a team sport, but it is in that I have to support you to land your trick or to do this. And then you think about perseverance. Somebody, before they can ollie their skateboard or do a kickflip, they fall down 1,000 times. And you look at the US and Cuban relationship, and I think that for our closest Caribbean neighbor, you think about the MLB and how they have this opportunity, and I'm sure you guys are all familiar with Yasiel Puig and his kind of plight to get to America and things like that. I think that it's a great opportunity to reshape a relationship that has been sour for, you know, since the 1959 revolution, and even before that, going back to the Spanish-American War and imperialism and things like that in Cuba. Unfortunately now, it seems as though we're kind of taking some steps back politically. However, I think skateboarding can be a good vehicle moving forward to reshape and re-examine the relationship. And I do think that the burden is on our shoulders to be the leaders when those in the political offices, and I say that on both sides, aren't doing their part to move the dial forward.
Well, Brendan, you're dealing with what many of us spend a lot of our anxious hours worrying about, which is polarized communities in today's world. And you're dealing with some of the most obviously polarized. What are some of the ways that you've approached sort of bringing these different sides together?
I think, and Bethany touched on a few of the values that we very much share. I think most importantly is this notion, especially if you're trying to build relationships across divided lines, it can't be event-based activities or temporary. These are serious situations, they're long-standing conflicts, they're complicated, and so we've built out our programming where kids are not only involved, you know, multiple times a week throughout the year, but over a multiple of years. And those relationships are not going to be developed overnight. Your change of mindset, we talk a lot about moving from seeing somebody as an object to seeing them as a human being and developing real friendships, and also the multiplier effect in terms of working with families and bringing communities in. So that notion of, and you can't just show up in a place and say, I'm here, and not know what you're doing, not have the right local ownership, not spend the time building the trust, because you can do a lot more harm than good. So for us, it's around that continuity, being there in a continuous and kind of year-round and being consistent. It's around having local leadership and not just saying it, actually building an organization that's structured, to have local leadership that actually are empowered to make decisions and lead, not just, fake. So each one of our sites, again, is its own. We're not telling them what to do. We're all part of a collaborative effort, but their local boards and their management teams are leading, not us. The notion of making the sport really good and fun. For us, if you made it about a peace-building program, number one, you're not going to get the kids that you want. They're not going to trust it. They're not going to come back. You got to make it the sport really good, really fun, have opportunities for competitive clubs to, and for kids to play and get better. And also, the better you are, the more that you're going to love it, and also the visibility. So for example, in Israel, we're based in Jerusalem, and we have the first ever mixed club system in Israel. We have Jewish and Arab kids playing together every day in the highest level of basketball in Israel. And in 2015, our under 18 girls, 5 Jewish, 5 Arab girls, won the under 18 national championship. And we've got this great video. You couldn't have written any better. We've got a girl gets a rebound, makes the winning basket with 3 seconds left. You see all the parents, Israeli and Palestinian parents, cheering behind this. And this is not easy to happen. There's a 10-year effort to get this where we were. And you see the girls arms around each other, jumping up and down at half court, celebrating not only the victory, but like, all right, what does this mean? And you see everybody else witnessing it. And I think that, for me, is the power of sport, the power of team. And those relationships could never, ever have been developed unless they had struggled, they had been together every day, they had lost, they had won. And it was really kind of incredible to see.
Well, each one of these remarkable programs seems to have grown organically from even the seed of an idea. There were no sort of proposals written and grant applications and so on. But I'm going to invite each of you to reflect a little bit on some of the lessons and whether you might have done things differently. What do you make of it all now that you've got to where you are?
Yeah, probably I'll jump on the peace building part. I think the first time I heard peace building was in the second year in the program. Before that, I came from an engineering background. I don't know what development is. I don't know how to use sport for development. It's just something happened naturally. I love soccer, but rugby was something new. I can attract kids. So for me, the program or the project, the impact that has, on top of the impact on kids, the impact that has on me myself, that I changed my whole career because of what I experienced in that program. Where I feel if I want to help Libya in the future, then definitely I need to develop skills in these peace building, conflict resolution, development, and these new vocabulary that I hadn't heard before the program. So I think the exposure, this experience dealing with kids and dealing with donors and getting funds and developing projects, it's had a huge impact not only on the kids but also on the organizers and the leaders of the projects themselves.
What about Bethany? What ways you would have done it differently, lessons you've learned?
So reflecting on that question, I'm continually amazed that the core elements that America Scores, DC Scores started out with are still the same: soccer, poetry, and service. And I think what's made it work and what's made it sticky, as I reflect on that, is a couple of things. One is, like Brendan said, it's got to be fun. If it's not fun, the kids aren't coming. So why are you doing it? So number one, it's got to be fun. Number two, much like Brendan said, it's got to be local. So each of our affiliates in each of our cities are locally owned and locally operated. They have deep connections with the local school district because that's where trust comes from. Trust doesn't come from, me up here in DC saying, hey, you in Milwaukee, do that. It comes from that local community from the bottoms up. And I think the most important evolution that we've made over our quarter century is really partnering with our schools in a different way. We really see ourselves not as outside vendors and something that's nice to have for a school district and for some kids, but as true partners. We go into schools and we won't go into a school building without an MOU from that principal because we want to understand what the principal's goals are. We want to understand what that school district's goals are and how we can support them through our program, through our teams, through our model. How can we actually help that community strengthen from within? And I think that's a really important shift to the way programs often think of as they're scaling, which is I have this great solution, I'm going to go now give it to you or impose it on you or whatever it is, and hopefully it'll work, right? If it's not really authentically embedded in that local community, no matter how wonderful it is, it won't last when your incredible founders move on to do something else. And if you really want to look at it lasting, that's what matters. And I think the third and final thing that we've really learned over the years is how much identity kids attach to their sports teams, especially the types of kids that we work with who don't have a whole lot of other options, right? So I grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and I played T-ball Little League. I never go around going, woohoo, Baton Rouge T-ball Little League, I see that T-shirt, that's who I am, because I had a lot of options. I was very fortunate. But if I walk down the street of DC wearing this shirt with this logo, I cannot tell you the number of times someone somewhere hollers at me, leaps off a metro to say hi, calls at me from their bike and goes, oh my God, DC Scores? I was in DC Scores and blah, blah, blah school and 10 years ago. It's such a core part of identity for the kids that we work with, and reinforcing that identity and the importance of that identity and a positive identity is such an invaluable thing for the kids.
Miles.
Yeah, well, I would definitely echo these two. It's only been 10 years, so I feel like we're still a bit in our infancy, but for Lauren and I, it's been our whole adult life since we graduated college, and just looking back, I think that it's planting seeds and nurturing them and making sure that, we fight our battle here in America for funding and partners and things like that, and then making sure that our staff and participants in Cuba are Cubans and they're the ones leading the way. I indeed look like I'm Cuban, but I'm not. And so providing those tools and resources and putting them in the hands of Cuban boys and girls is really important. Again, in terms of like restructuring the American and Cuban relationship, I'm here to help them solve the problems, but I'm not here to tell them. Someone said earlier, it's not you tell people what to think, but give them the tools to think how they think. So yeah, just looking back, it's a challenge with Cuba and America in terms of funding, travel. Obama made it much easier, but when we first started going to Cuba, we had to go through Canada, through the Bahamas, through Mexico. But I guess my words of wisdom would just be in all these different programs, it's very genuine people who have a passion that it's not just they see a business plan that has dollars on it, it's they see helping people solve problems, making the world a better place. And I think it's, that Mandela quote where sport is a language of itself, and Muhammad Ali said service to others is the rent we must pay for our space here on earth. And then just really being true to a cause and knowing that we all have different roles that we have to play. I skate, but I'm definitely not the best skateboarder that walks the earth, but I found the best that have participated in Cuba Skate. I'm not the best woodworker, but I've learned a lot, and I've worked with people and brought them to Cuba so that it is this balance of skills from the athletic side to the partnerships to the fundraising. And I guess, if I could have started over in a perfect world, it's, having the right donors and board and things like that. But it's been a tremendous learning experience where I got to do the nonprofit executive management program here at Georgetown, which was really fundamental, I think, to the growth of our organization. But otherwise, just running an organization is getting a PhD, JD, MA, all that in one. And it's been a really remarkable experience.
Great. And Brendan?
I think I would have made sure we started work in the U.S. before we did. So until 2017, we'd been around for 16 years and have been almost exclusively on, in kind of places outside the States. And we were fortunate to come in with the right partner in Nike, but So right now we're in Baltimore, Brooklyn, Detroit, Chicago, and LA. And we have a crisis on our hands. I mean, in lots of respects, but I know it's been alluded to today. Kids in underserved areas, they just don't have the opportunities to play. And so all these values and lessons that we're talking about what we had growing up, some of the programs that provide, the vast majority of kids in these places don't have it. And what they're losing out on, it's a tragedy. And organizations like ours, we can fill some of that need, but the amount of kids that we're working with isn't even, I mean, it's not even close to what's needed. And so I know Tom Ferry's here and Aspen's done a lot of great work on this, but I don't know if people aren't aware of it enough, but think about it, being a kid and not being able to play sports, not feeling safe enough to go outside, not having the programs. And there's been a huge mistake, I feel, with the right intentions, whether it's government or corporate, coming in and say, oh, we're going to build you a facility or build a park. Guess what? There's enough of those, where there's not enough of good programs, trained coaches, and jobs for them. And unless we figure this out, we're going to have a generation of kids that don't get the benefits that we all did growing up and playing sports. So for us, I mean, again, it's only been 2 years in these places, but that's what's struck me. I'm like, wow, why do we wait this long? There's such a gap here.
Well, we're dealing with a whole set of different problems. The access problem is clearly one. The other is trying to bridge the divides that separate rich and poor, but also different religious groups, different ethnic, different political. You have a sort of unique experiences. How would you look at ways of multiplying this? Sort of the social entrepreneurship principle. What would be a sensible way to preserve the initiative and the learning that you have without getting into bureaucracy? What ideas might you suggest of how to benefit from the kind of initiative that you all have shown?
Well, I would say, I mean, within our own organization, we've just launched a leadership academy. We've been around, like I said, for 20 years with kids that have gone through the program. The question is, all right, what happens to them? And so we've developed a program for kids in their, well, not kids, adults in their 20s that have been through our programs as participants and coaches to support their own academic and career paths. And our dream, whether it be in Northern Ireland or in Israel and Palestine or in the United States, is that you have people in the public and private sectors that have had these experiences, that have developed these relationships and mindsets and leadership abilities, and know the other side, that they're at the negotiating table, that they're the business leaders. And so for the next 15 years, our effort is going to be to provide those young people with the types of leadership experiences as well as exposure to our network and the network of other people in that community to support them in doing that. And also, I can tell you from working in lots of different places, the feeling of being part of something bigger than yourself and learning from others in conflict communities that are doing their own peace-building work, that's really inspirational, because a lot of times you're in your neighborhood, you're in your place, and you become, this is it. But to really say, all right, there are other people doing it, I can learn from them and be connected to them, and also feel like what I'm doing is not just about my block, it's about something bigger.
Any other dreams?
Yeah, something we've tried, and I think we're proud of it. Like now, most of the coaches were participants of our program. They were players, but now they are coaches. So we from the day one, we had the plan of investing in our participants to develop their leadership skills and also develop their technical skills, how to train and take the lead after like the new coaches leave the program or something like that. So I think investing in the participant self is one important point. Second point is to find channels for the participant to go to play at the professional level. So we linked our participants with the rugby committee, the government rugby committee. Some of them, they play for the national team now. So I think marketing this dream to kids is like, through our program, then come and play with us. You have a chance of raising up and go and play at the national level. That is something very important. But again, I think investing in the participants is very crucial.
Yeah, I would second that. And at least in our experience, skateboarding is a sport, but it's also artistry, photography, woodworking, and so many other things. So for us, our kind of motto is that we're providing kids with the tools to skate through life, so that when their skateboard's broken or their shoes have holes in them, they've learned things through skateboarding that apply to other facets of life. And I think just like a DIY spirit in general, it's very strong in skateboarding, but a lot of times you're not given an opportunity, so make one for yourself.
And to speak, everything they said I absolutely agree with. We do a lot of similar things. To speak to your question about scale, I think there's two things. One, people don't talk about often enough, which is the money. We, here in DC, we've tripled the number of kids we serve in the last 7 years. During that time, our wait list has doubled and stayed. I can't get it down, no matter how many schools we add every year. And that is really a factor of money, having sufficient back-end infrastructure to actually run a high-quality youth sports program actually costs money. And there's just not a lot of funding for that kind of scale. The second thing, and several of these guys have touched on it, is coaches and coach quality. So one of the ways to impact far beyond just the kids that we work with on our teams is training coaches. So we provide all of our coaches 17 hours of training a year. A number of our coaches are alumni or have been coaching with us for a long time. The beauty about those coaches is that they don't just coach with us. They coach in other youth sports programs. They coach in other sports at their school. They're school teachers and working with kids. And so focusing working with coaches not just on the skill development of the individual sport, but on youth development, on social emotional learning, which I know Aspen has done a bunch about recently, in the nexus of youth sports and social emotional learning, on how to actually work with kids at different ages and stages of their lives, or kids who live in trauma, which is something that Up to Us Sports, which I know is also in this room, has worked on. Really equipping coaches with those tools, the people who are the front line working directly with kids in sports, can pay off dividends far beyond what we could ever, even with all the money in the world, could scale to.
Can I just add, going back to your original remarks about around scale and around outcomes, the better that organizations individually can track and show measurable outcomes. You talk about getting the money. That's a crucial piece. I think a criticism, some of it valid, some of it's not, around the sport for development sector and the lack of good measure. I think actually a lot of organizations that have good outcomes and have dedicated a lot of resources to this, and it's particularly challenging around peace building and around relationship development, because it's a little tougher to measure than something like academics or health. So I would say that piece plus the collaboration. And that's the biggest change I've seen over 19 years of doing this. When we first started, it was a much smaller number of organizations, and everyone was very much just about themselves and battling for their own funding and support. And a really neat evolution has been the amount of working together and collaboration, whether it be formally or informally, that our sector is doing.
I want to touch on the outcomes and impact part. I think most donors now, they want to see, not they just give them money for a good goal, but they also want to see results. And you need to prove results in impact evaluation studies and stuff like that. I think sports and development, they lack in that term. Like if you look up for any impact evaluation study for sports, you will find a few. You'll be amazed finding a few. There are a lot of projects and they're doing a great job, but I think no one invested in kind of producing this impact evaluation studies and results and showing in numbers how impactful these programs. So I think it's in our part, we need to invest more in kind of making these studies and creating these studies, so donors will be convinced to some extent and seeing the results on papers. Yeah.
I'm struck that both Miles and Bethany have emphasized the multi-sector approach. In other words, it's not just sports, it's linking skills in other areas, the arts and so forth. Whereas Mohammed and Brendan are really focusing on this, what's called peace building but even though you didn't call it peace building in the beginning, sort of bringing peace building to life in unusual ways. So I don't know if you have anything to add on that, or if any of you have questions for each other. We're going to have about 10 minutes, I think, to open it up to questions. But first, I don't know if you have any observations on those. That strikes me, in a sense, the complexity of the challenge.
I think it's also the locations.
Yeah.
Cuba is a third world country, but it's not impoverished. There's other skateboarding organizations in the Middle East where they're dealing with different realities. And a lot of, as we look at funding from different organizations in the US, they're targeting at-risk, underserved, low income. That doesn't exist in Cuba, beyond the financial barriers because of the trade embargo. But it's been important to think that skateboarding and all sports kind of have a shelf life, and I believe they got into it in the panel earlier, but and I think it was the commissioner of the WNBA who was speaking, what can these athletes do when they're finished with their careers? What happens then in their professional life? And that's been really kind of rudimentary and crucial to our organization, where someone may love skateboarding now, but 5 years from now, maybe their knees and bones hurt from falling down 10 stairs every day for 5 years. And so it's thinking what life skills, from entrepreneurship to craftsmanship and things like that, can you implement and develop over time? And I think that, to echo on collaboration, we have done a lot of good work, but it's also crucial to work with the right partners and to know that, what you do will only be made better if you work with the right partners. And I think that that's also been really crucial to our organization, and I think many others.
I was struck, Catherine, by your comments, because I think what we've heard from all of the organizations is that sports is the entry point, right? It's not necessarily the end point. None of us came up here and said, oh, my goal is to create the next best basketball player, soccer ball player, skateboarder, rugby player, right?
Yeah.
And we've been around long enough that we've actually seen some incredibly talented soccer players come out of our organization. And I'm sure you guys will have similar results by virtue of the fact that kids who are entering the sport through our programs would not have other means to enter the sport, or even if they had means, may not stick with the sport because they wouldn't have built that trust with their community. And so that's what I think the other aspect of it is, there's a trust that's built, right? Sports, you're in it, right? You're fighting every day with the same people and the same kids and the same coaches, and there's a common goal. And it's not about the dilemma that's happening across the border. It's not about the gunfire on your street, right? And it's not about the trade embargo, and it's not about the dilemma happening across your border. When you're in that moment, in that game, right, you're there, your partner's there, your teammate, your opponent, your coach. And that starts to build trust when you do that over and over and over with the same people, and you see them over and over and over. And I think that's really what you're seeing, is that trust.
Well, just to challenge the peace builders, what advice do you have for the sort of peace building field that comes out of the kinds of programs you're doing?
Yeah, we have a partnership with a group called Arbinger, and we've worked with them for the last 12 or so years on a curriculum that is delivered on and off the court, that is not necessarily sitting in a classroom setting. It's not necessarily talking about the different histories or viewpoints, but are really about that human connection. And if I can see this person that might look different than me or have a different religion or be from somewhere different, but I can see the commonalities, if I can see how we have similar motivations, and I can see you really as a human being, and then that move to, if I can see one person as a human being, can I see a group? And then also this notion of collusion, where I do something bad to somebody, someone does something bad to me, it gets worse and worse and worse, and I don't feel like I have any power, right? And the notion of, actually, yeah, you do. But kids don't want to be lectured to. So really balancing a curriculum, both in terms of the lessons that you're trying to teach your kids, how you train your coaches, because if your coaches don't believe in it and aren't living it, then the kids aren't going to buy in either. And at the same time, making it about fun and the sport, because for us, what enables the relationships between our kids to grow and families to be connected, it all starts on the basketball court and playing together and building the trust that actually now I can have these conversations. Now I can, get into my deeper story. I can have this person over for a sleepover. And then as they get older, I'm now mentoring younger kids. And so it really is a process, and it has to be well thought out and well managed. But if you make it too academic and too inauthentic, the kids are never going to do it. And so really for us, and also lastly, each area that we're in is a different context, a different environment, and recognizing, okay, what's universal versus what is tweaked based on a country or a city. And using your experience, but not overvaluing your experience from somewhere else, because every place is a little bit different.
I totally agree with that, and I think one of the important points, especially in a conflict or post-conflict environment, is that you need to give this youth hope. You need to give them that something that a community or a group that if they can be part of, then at that time they can achieve their goals and move on their lives. So I think, again, I agree that rugby was the entry point. But then we figured out this could be a vehicle that we can deliver other things, that we can help in investing in our program participant, and also giving back to community, and also like uniting the country by creating a national team, or the IDBs bring them to play with the hosting community. So I think the mere fact that we gave this project to kids, and the kids saw an opportunity, and instead of playing on the street or joining militia or not going to school, it's an important for them so they can say, all right, Libya's in conflict now, we have no future, let's go to Europe and swim the Mediterranean. No, you can still be a rugby player, you can still achieve your goals, and you can still be something in the future.
Well, that's wonderful. Let's see if there are some questions. We have a few minutes. And I can't see very well, so I don't know if someone can help me. Someone getting a microphone?
Yes, I have a microphone here. So I'm hiding behind the podium here.
Okay, please.
Thank you. I'm Matthias Lundberg. I work for the institution, Catherine, that you used to work for, the World Bank, which is slow and bureaucratic and risk-averse.
No, it's not.
But I was delighted by the presentations and the conversation here, particularly from Mohammed and from Brendan, about evidence, because that's how we're going to reach scale. That's how we're really going to multiply and reach scale. And although there are thousands and thousands of programs around the world that have served millions of young people and have yielded wonderful stories, that's not enough to move an institution like mine. In order to get the World Bank to move, we need the evidence that Mohammed and Brendan were talking about. And so I would like to challenge everyone here to help us to build that evidence. Of the thousands of programs around the world, I've actually found only five studies that have looked at this rigorously. And those 5 have frankly been not great, right? The evidence is not great. I believe that these things do work and they will have an impact on young people's lives, but we need to do a better job of showing that they do. So I'd like to ask everyone here, to challenge everyone here to help us to build the evidence, to make these things, to bring this evidence out, and to make institutions like mine more amenable to funding and working with partners and clients to achieve these goals through sport programs. So thank you for that. But I would like also to challenge the people on the board, on the dais, to talk about their experience of trying to look at these things more rigorously. Brendan, I know that you have, under Peace Players, you've worked with some researchers to try to build some of these things. Mohammed, you actually work at the World Bank. so you're wearing 2 hats at the moment, or 3 hats even at the moment. And for everyone to think about or to reflect on what the evidence really shows. We're trying to build a program now together with an institution called Laureus and with a couple of bilateral donors, France and Japan, to build the evidence. But I really would like to have all of your help to build this more powerfully. Thank you.
Claudia, can I just say, so we are just about to complete a 9-year randomized control trial led by researchers at NYU and in Israel. And we have, up till now, we've got pretty good data around attitude change and around leadership development. What we didn't have is studies around what this all means. How does this lead to behavior change? So we've had a group from NYU follow the same set of kids and a control group over the course of the last 9 years. We've learned a lot, and I would just add, as for organizations like ours, there's almost even a greater benefit to what you learn from rigorous evaluation than what you can show. But I can tell you, we found some good things and we've found some things that haven't been working. The most promising is that this study has shown a dramatic increase in peace building and advocacy behaviors among our kids. So essentially that means their willingness to stand up in a group setting with people that haven't had these experiences or think differently and advocate for this way in terms of seeing others as human beings, and really against the, especially in Israel, it's gotten even a lot worse over the last six or 7 years, just the prejudice and the hate. So the challenge of that, it was really expensive. So organizations like ours, there's not a whole lot of places where we can get funding to support evaluation. Ours was through USAID and USIP. So we're really grateful they were willing to do this and do it over a multiple of years. In the peace building field, if you expect to get good evidence in 6 to 9 or 12 months, it's not real. So for us, we were really fortunate that we had researchers that understood it. We had an institution that was willing to take a long-term investment, and we had people on the ground that recognized the importance of it. So I'm hopefully we'll hopefully have it done in about a year. I'm really obviously excited to be able to show it, because you're right. The sport development field, but particularly around peace building, whether it's sport or not, there's not a lot of studies like this.
Well, I think is a critical point that you made, that in a sense it's not finding sort of pure evidence like, of a new vaccine that shows that this is the answer, but that it allows you to learn about how different things, that's one of the messages here, is that everything is different, that it has to be locally grounded if it's going to work. So I think this question of finding ways to help the groups learn, and I think it also would help us to have a better idea of the universe of all of these, particularly these local projects. So anyway, I think here is the basic answer, we agree. But the question is how to do it in a meaningful way, and how not to have unrealistic expectations, that it's going to happen instantly and that you'll have a perfect result of the cure for Ebola or whatever, that it's part of a very complex process. Are we at the end of the time? Okay, well then I can only ask you to thank these wonderful leaders.